Okay.
You know, Adam, I'm going to be real with you right now.
Yeah.
I didn't have any intro planned. I know I'm supposed to be the intro guy because it's a you episode, but I have literally nothing. And I thought actually that my candor and, my authenticity
would lift us.
Fucking be a perfect introduction to Blair Witch Project. See how I did that? You little behind the scenes, little found footage of this podcast. We're talking Directorpiece Theater. I'm Abe Epperson, but today the star, the man who's going to bring us the, not the introduction, the meat of the episode. You know who you are.
I know who I am. I'm Adam Ganser. This was a shaky cam intro, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So Abe, do you want to let out your first major thing? Do you want to just like bleed it right onto the canvas to start?
The thing I said before.
Yeah. Do you want to say it, or do you want to come back to it?
Yeah, I think this is kind of a trash movie. Blair Witch Project. I mean, I'm not saying it's not seminal. You're gonna go into it, and I'm gonna like nod, and I'm gonna be like, I actually agree with you. Yeah, it is all these things, but also on top of that, it's a trash movie.
Did you watch it in the theater?
I did.
I did too.
As a young lad in 1999.
Me too. Do you remember feeling like, oh my God, this is like overwhelming with the camera stuff? Do you remember?
I do. And I actually remember the feeling of asking myself, is this real?
Yeah, of course.
You know?
That's all anybody remembers.
And then the little wooden figurines popped up, and I was like, nah, someone had to go there and
make that, right,
those.
Of course.
Like, there's no fucking way. But that suspension of disbelief is exactly what made the Blair Witch Project so popular, right?
Right. I think that's probably its most enduring legacy. If you're living under a rock, you've probably never heard of the film The Blair Witch Project, which was released in 1999. But you should know it did change the course of film history in a couple ways. The first and probably most famous is that it's sort of like the Rosetta Stone for all found footage movies, meaning that like it became a genre after this movie. It wasn't the first movie to do it, by the way, but it just seems like it's the one that was popular, the Edison of that story, if you will. And like, we're still getting found footage movies. We're always going to get found footage movies. This movie kind of put that on the map. The horror genre in particular has been pretty captivated by this technique. And we've had several pretty notable entries like Paranormal Activity or Creep or Host, and a bunch of others that are of this genre. And I would even say those movies that are like screen-based movies, like Unfriended and stuff. Those are also an update on found footage movies, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's a fair characterization. So all of that comes back to Blair Witch. So that alone is a pretty significant legacy. But also, it is basically like the Rosetta Stone for independent filmmaker success. Like, it is the dream story as an independent filmmaker. They made it for $35,000. Which, how much? $35,000, is that a lot of money, Abe? Is that a lot of money?
No, we made sketches for our jobs for that much, and we're like, thank you.
Yeah,
exactly. Thank you for that much money.
Exactly. Yeah, I can think of 4 or 5 sketches we made offhand that were more money than that.
Right.
So
but,
that's pretty wild.
I've also made the $1,000 sketches.
Right. Yes.
I'm like a Blair Witch.
Yeah, you
project.
are a Blair Witch.
yeah. Just pointing it out. No. It's not for this runtime, for the amount of scenes they had to get. It's basically like it really was what they wanted to be. I feel like it was the directors and the actors and like a sound guy out there in the woods.
Right.
And that was like it.
Yeah, basically. So like just for comparison, it's about $35,000 is like about 5% of a really low budget movie's budget.
Right.
Like as in like, a $500,000 independent film is made for nothing. That's like nothing in the independent world. And this is, less than 10% of that. So it's really truly nothing. And they shot it in 8 days. Again, another miracle, a thing that would never happen in a film being made in any way that resembles the studio process.
It kind of shows.
Oh, I agree with that. I think you're totally right about that. And I want you to keep bringing that stuff up because I think that is
Yeah.
important to acknowledging the strengths and weaknesses of it. Anyway, it got into Sundance the way all of us dream our films will, and then it got picked up by Artisan and made over $200 million worldwide. It's like the ultimate success story. And funny enough, it is also kind of a pioneering effort in several different cinematic conventions. One of them is sort of the meta-narrative documentary. They didn't invent that, but they are early in that process. That's now kind of more of a standard thing. And probably most importantly, and this is, I'm sure, where Abe's going to get, like, blow his witch stack, they are kind of the first major advertising your film on the internet success story. And they sort of created a template that now can no longer exist. So they are like this, they're like this door that opened from, the abyss, and then they walked through it into Hollywood success and closed it behind them.
Right.
But they figured it out first. So,
They really did.
Yeah, they did. And you have to kind of acknowledge that. So today we're going to talk a little bit about just sort of a bunch of different aspects of how the film was made. We're going to talk about their development and their production. And what we're going to notice is that there are sort of two guiding factors for all of their decisions. And I'm hoping that Abe and I are going to basically have a debate about the merits of these two poles in filmmaking and sort of what does it mean for other films and how does it guide our experience as filmmakers. The first one is that this is a film that has what I would call a relentless commitment to authenticity, like just relentlessly so. And that's from the writing all the way down to the casting, to the production, all of it. And the second guiding pole is that their budget is so small that they cannot do the studio method. They had to do a method that was not the studio method because they didn't have the resources to make a film the traditional way, even the traditional independent way. So we're going to see how they dealt with both of those two things and discuss the merits of those decisions as we go. So probably, I mean, these are some conclusions I think we'll reach, but we might not. One of them is, I think we'll notice that Hollywood learned the wrong things from this movie. Like the things that truly added up to its success, I think Hollywood did not learn those things.
I like that. That's spicy.
But I think that'll emerge. It might not, but I think so. And second, you'll see that ultimately it was a hell of a lot of luck that kept this movie from basically dying in an abandoned basement with the audience turning its back to it. Like luck. That's a big part of why this worked. And we'll talk about how that is true. And why that's important for every film. I mean, every film basically has to get lucky to succeed on the level this one did. So we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yes.
So Abe, that means basically, like, please feel free to at any point be like, wait, let's talk about what that means. Like, please feel free to do that. Because we're gonna do that.
For right now, I want to just be on the ride.
Okay,
I wanna
great.
Be on the Adam ride.
Fantastic. So, guys, I'm sure a lot of you probably know these facts about the Blair Witch. I don't think that this is going to be like breaking new ground, but I do think that talking about it from a filmmaking point of view might lend some new insights into why these decisions were made. I hope so. That's the goal. The first thing is that Blair Witch started very similarly to how most indie films do, especially the successful ones, which is the filmmakers were like really, really good at consuming a niche area of film creation that didn't exist much in the popular culture. So like they had this niche avenue of film that they were consuming and that they were experts in. So in this case, that means Daniel Merrick and Eduardo Sanchez were consuming a lot of paranormal documentaries. Like, whatever that means. They were watching a bunch of, like, documentaries on ghosts and spirits and all that stuff. And they ended up having a conversation about how the reality of these documentaries way more terrifying than any horror movie could be.
And that's probably right.
I mean, of course, right? Like, I think that tapping into that visceral dread about the other worlds,
there are implications and notions in this movie, but perhaps better done in other films.
Oh, for sure.
That are more considerations of horror, like just the idea, putting a planning in the audience's mind, an idea of like a circumstance, like like the kids looking in the corner or something like that, and what that image means. It haunts you because your imagination fills in the blanks, right?
Yes, which
It's less so than especially modern horror, which is all about scares, right?
I mean, a lot of horror movies do rely on the audience to fill in the blanks, but this one, I think, goes much further than others in that regard.
It does than, like, let's say, another found footage, like Paranormal or VHS.
Right.
Which are more about showing you the unique money shots that found footage has to offer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. My favorite found footage movie, by the way, as a genre, is Cloverfield.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an example of using found footage only as a device and not having to live with any of the conventions that found footage usually involves.
Mm-hmm.
So we might, from time to time, use them as a comparison point, because Cloverfield obviously has millions of dollars to make the film. So anyway, so in the sense that that Myrick and Sanchez were like experts in this weird little genre, that's pretty common among your very famous indie filmmakers who became success stories. So like Tarantino, obviously. I mean, Wes Anderson, Soderbergh was very like format, like driven, and he still is. Robert Rodriguez, David O. Russell, lots of these guys like had really boutique interest points that their film career has subsequently explored.
That's right.
And some of them got away from it, but most of them they didn't. So these guys are the same. But what's interesting to me about that focus is that their commitment to authenticity was the idea, right? It's not just like a cool method to get an interesting movie. It is the movie, right? Like generating the reality is the point of this movie. And not just like, hey, we're going to shoot this grungy on 16 and like low light and stuff so it feels real, which is how a lot of people would do authentic.
No,
right?
Every shot has a very specific implication of this is all for real. Therefore, like the camera holding, all these things are now considerations.
Right.
Like,
right.
What does frame see? What does sound hear? These are all things that filmmakers have to do all the time. But when you have a narrative instead of like I guess what you're calling it, this kind of meta narrative implication of it, because just dictated by the format, it means that there's just a lot more choices.
Absolutely.
And they all, in order to get a tone right, choices have to be right. And that's why I think found footage generates mostly
misses.
Trash.
Yeah, misses.
Because there's too many things for me to just be like, I don't know why that is, or that moment doesn't hit the way you want it to, man. It's
hard because if you do a really great job with the choice making of like, where is the angle? What are we seeing? Like a movie like Cloverfield, it stops feeling a found footage movie and starts feeling like a real movie because like nobody would operate the camera so successfully. So creating the sense that this is accidentally telling a good story,
right?
It is really challenging. But Blair Witch took a really, I think, innovative approach to that, and we'll talk about that in a second. For better, for worse, So I think they did get the feeling of authenticity through the film in a way no found footage film has done since, for reasons that will become clearer. So anyway, most of the time when people talk about reality or authenticity, they're really talking about a set of camera choices and lighting choices and maybe performance choices that all add up to this feeling of like, wow, it's really grounded and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's what, I mean, for lack of a better term, like some of the mumblecore movement was about that, right? Some of the 90s films that were being done, like Festen, or the Danish films. What were those called again? What was that movement called? The
Dogma 95
Veritas
films?
Yeah, the Veritas movement, right?
Cinema Verite.
Yeah.
Verite.
That's the idea there, right? It's like we're going to get more to authentic filmmaking by getting rid of all this excess equipment and all this like unnecessary trappings of a studio system, and it feels like, oh, this is real, right? Blair Witch is is doing something different than that, because Blair Witch is not trying to make you feel like the movie's real. They're trying to make the reality of it unquestionable. Like they're trying to make that beyond question.
Exactly.
You know, like it's like authenticity, like it's certified real. Like that's what this is about. So yeah.
That's the interesting notion behind them, is that they have to succeed in that in order for this all to work.
Yes, they do.
This might be the closest, only because it was the first, and like I said, as a child, it did work.
Right. It worked on your first viewing. You know?
So great success. Blair Witch, you're all good. But like because it's a genre, now the lexicon has been updated.
That's
like
interesting.
The whole trick. So like I want
like it doesn't hold up
authenticity
now because of that?
Authenticity in a single shot.
Okay.
How many times in this film, and all, you know, films after really have done this trope, where the end of the movie does it, probably most famously.
Mm-hmm.
We hold a little too long. The editor refuses to cut on a shot that is like this meditative or horrifying moment, right? I think that that's something that was probably created out of the directors watching all this footage, and they're like, man, I'm watching this section and I'm just bored. But there's something about like at any time, a spooky ghost could come out. And so they do that a lot, right? Lingering shots on like, what is anyone looking at? And that's a moment where in my brain, I can never help but go, like, it's meant to be authentic, but all I think of is just like a robot who stops acting. Like the person who's operating the camera has stopped.
So is right, because is it because you understand what's really happening?
I think so.
Okay. It is hard to unsee what's happening. So it's possible that I am ruining the Blair Witch Project for you guys today. That's possible. Because I agree that, you know, once you know how fake movies really are, it's hard to believe them anymore with stuff like this movie in particular. But
it is like, I am proposing a very defeatist kind of like, well, then all movies are facsimiles.
Which is a thing I've heard you say.
Yes.
And I don't think that's a big problem. I think this movie, first of all, it came out in a less cynical time. You know, like that late 90s, True. before 2001. Is a time where even though we were ironic, we weren't as cynical as we became pretty soon thereafter.
Or am I saying that we should watch movies in this way? I'm just saying it's how I watch movies.
Yeah, right. I watched them defeated with cigarettes just like, on both sides of my mouth.
Fucking, you gonna cut
cool
to
a
second
up.
Shot? Yeah. A third shot. Oh, now we're in a movie. Okay. A fifth shot and a sixth shot.
I bet he's got goals. I bet the scene has an objective.
Oh, what is this? Credits? Everyone wants attention. All right, enough with my bit.
I like that bit. Anyway, so now let's talk a little bit about how they wrote the film and how they cast the film. So, first thing everyone needs to know, not a single line of dialogue was ever written for this film. The most robust version of the film that was written was a 35-page treatment that basically hit on major events. That's it. And whenever you decide I'm not going to write a line of dialogue, you've now committed to incredible trust to your actors. Like profound trust in your actors, like, because they're gonna write the movie. Now they're the writers.
I really like the idea of the filmmakers feeling like, I know this isn't the situation, but if the filmmakers thought that they had like, they felt like they're faking making movies, like they secretly didn't know how to make a movie. And it's like and someone told them that they have to make a movie. Like, your assignment is to make a movie.
And
so they're thinking of all the ways that like, it's still a movie, but we can do the least amount of work possible.
I mean, it's true that I'm going to say this very gently. I think a lot of people who journey into, let's make an improv film, are doing
almost
it
out of necessity.
are doing
Right.
it because they can't write. Yeah, because they can't write or they don't.
Ooh, it's even more brutal than the opinion I thought you were gonna have. But yeah, I could see that.
I mean, or they don't want to write. You know what I mean? Like which to me is just another
They
version
don't
of
wanna
can't. Now,
I mean,
now there
yeah,
are
no.
comedy filmmakers who do this, and I think are very talented, and it produces great results. Like, of course, like I would say, Curb Your Enthusiasm, right? Famously doesn't write lines; they write outlines. And Curb Your Enthusiasm is pretty awesome, but like most people aren't Larry David. You know what I mean? Like, and also he's pretty particular about who he lets be in his episodes.
Play. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and once you're good, then you stay on the cast forever. Like that's kind of what it is. Versus, in my opinion, Judd Apatow's work in the last like 15 years, which has not been scripted and has been pretty flat, right? Like, I mean, that's my opinion.
Sure,
It's pretty flat.
I mean, I think that there's many things that go into that assessment, but like I think he did this thing where he was like, I write scenes, and then like we just have a character. Like it's very Groundling school of improv, which is just like, all right, well, your character is a funny game. Like you're gonna mention, like, find a bit. Okay, you found the bit, a bit for a character. Okay, now just go and riff on that, and then the audience will be able to get and see a funny character, and we'll include them as much as we want, and that's their charm. I think of like Will Ferrell on Eastbound and Down. It's almost like the bloopers to that are better than the thing.
Of course they are.
Why? Because it's its own thing. You just added it into the movie.
Well, because and
I
also
don't want to get soapbox about it.
No, you're
but
right.
That's exactly how these things are done.
Because the blooper reel is when we, the audience, no longer expect them to meet the narrative requirements. So then they're just allowed to Rolodex jokes, which is what they're doing anyway. That's what they're actually doing.
Yeah. And then it feels, there's so many things that go into the psychology of why that is more effective in a way. But, so Judd Apatow, Curb Your Enthusiasm, these entities aren't wrong for thinking that this is not a format to create content that is enjoyable.
Sometimes it super works.
It isn't necessarily the tool you need for narrative filmmaking.
It's really hard to do it. I mean, you hear like guys like, not Mike Nichols. There's a guy who does a lot of improv based films, who just sort of like, I'll think of it later. Like maybe it's Greengrass. It's somebody like that who like, they get together with the actors and then they do rehearsals and they find the scene and then they record the scene. But I think it takes like a really seasoned director and really seasoned actors to go that far on a limb. Because, you need to know that at the end of the day, you can trust them to be in the scene authentically. And you need to know as a director that you're going to find a way to cover it. And also a way to bridge time if they get off on some weird tangent that needs to go, which they might do.
Right.
That's the danger with improv. You don't control it. It goes a lot of different directions. And I'm not saying that actors are not talented writers or whatever. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying, like, it means there's a lot of pressure on the actual production now.
In the moment.
Yeah, they like everyone's got to be authentic.
Usually a trained person would be the person that you want to entrust with that moment,
right,
to kind of control and you usher that moment into something worthy to be filmed. But this film didn't do that, though, right?
No, this film didn't do that. So that leads to the second thing that they did, which is to cast the film. They just put an ad in a acting publication called Backstage, and the casting call said, and this is a quote: "An improvised feature film shot in a wooded location. It's gonna be hell. Most of you reading this probably shouldn't come."
I love the frankness in that.
I did
it's
too.
Just like, fuck it.
I did too. Well,
yeah, it's like, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. This is not going to get you much attention. You want to get paid to be in a movie? We're making one.
Yeah, I mean, well, and also like they're looking for the person who's exactly their genetic match for this project, right? Like that's what they're looking for.
There's some arrogance in it.
Oh, I think there's ignorance in it.
Takeaway,
right? Has to be.
Well, I'm saying arrogance,
right?
Like specifically with you reading this probably shouldn't come. To me,
the tone
of
that's very dismissive.
It's like saying, like, actor, you won't be able probably to turn off the idea of you being an actor. And what we're looking for is someone more real. And I'm like, actors are people too. I mean, you can employ their very good gifts of being like learned in a craft, but you can tell them to turn it off too. It's easy to turn stuff off. They're arguing you can't, which, you know, I think that is up for debate.
I think that tells you, I think you're right that it could be interpreted that way and that it might be true. I think it also tells you, though, that they didn't plan on talking to the actors about their performance in an ongoing way. Like,
it does key you into the process a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
They want somebody who's going to be able to take the football and run most of the way. Like, yeah, they're the quarterback, but they're throwing a screen pass here. You're doing the running, you know?
Yeah, you're doing everything.
Yeah. So, like, there was an interview with Heather Donahue that I read. Heather Donahue plays the actress who's like the main character of this movie. And by the way, that interview was a teleportation back in time because, man, there were some dudes asking stupid ass questions. Yeah, just things like, you look so much better with makeup on. That kind of shit was good.
Oh my god.
Yeah, you can't believe it. You're like, wow, man, really? And also she was like kind of agreeing with some of it, which is like, man, that would never happen now. I just feel bad about it. Anyway, so that's an aside. So Heather Donahue,
the true darkness of Blair Witch.
Right?
Society.
Even in the woods, you can't escape it, Abe.
You just can't escape the male gaze.
I mean, right? So, right. By the way, it is interesting that Heather Donahue was won them over in the audition process because they wanted it to be three men. And like, I think casting her was a huge change to what this movie ends up being. Because she's the star of it, right? I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, I mean, her character is the main filmmaker, the director. So.
And the one kind of driving them forward on this film that they're making.
Insane scenes.
Right.
Insane.
Yeah.
The woods. Oh my God. We'll talk about
it. Yeah, for sure.
Just keep going.
So here's a quote from her from one of these interviews about how they explained their improv process, like what it was going to be like to potential actors. So, quote, they used every possible deterrent. When we actually got to the audition, there was another sign put out that said, we want natural people. If you've done improv before, which I had in a lot of wacky improv stuff, they said, if that's the kind of improv stuff you've done in the past, we probably don't want you. We want people who can behave completely naturally and can basically act in extreme circumstances. If you don't like that, go away. And then when they went into the room, I know, unbelievable. When they went into the room, one of the directors who auditioned her basically said, like they gave her just a situation that she was supposed to improv. Situation was, you've served 7 years behind your sentence. Why should we let you out on parole? And then she said whatever she said, and that was it. They cast her based on that response.
It's actually a very effective, like, auditioning process if that's the thing you're looking for.
I mean,
like, honestly,
okay,
if I'm putting my head if I'm putting my head into the director's head,
okay,
and saying like, okay, if I'm seeking to make a movie like Blair Witch, that's not a bad tactic in audition because they either got it or they don't.
Right.
And that means that she nailed this answer and she just was like, I just fucking started talking. And it was trying to be as authentic as possible, and they believed it. And you know what? You're gonna weed out a lot of people.
100%
do that. You know.
I mean, but I guess it is really one strong skill they want, and not sort of a plethora of tools for the actors. So I guess I agree with you. My initial instinct was to be like, "What a fucking stupid idea," but like, but honestly, I think you're right.
Is stupid, and you're right.
Like, I'm not trying to belittle these guys, but like as a concept, it feels very film school to me. Like very much like like just not willing to test the limits of the actor or the adjustability of the actor. Things you definitely want to know. They're like, no, we're not going to do any of that. We're just like, improv once and impress me, and then that's it. That seems very presumptuous to me, but maybe it was smart, like you're saying.
Well, I'm just saying it's an effective way to achieve what I think they did want.
Right.
What I think they wanted is also stupid.
Okay, so you're disagreeing with like the philosophy here, which
I don't think
get
that
it.
philosophy. I mean, I don't disagree with this tactic. I think that if you only do this tactic, you're a dum-dum. But you can this can be a fun exercise to do with your actors. Also, I think that the reason they asked this question, I should be clear. The reason they asked this question is because this is how they were going to direct.
Right, exactly. Right. That's correct.
Versus if this is just a good audition question. I do think it's a good audition question. I think it's dumb that they sought out to not have control of the movie.
Well, that's the thing.
But
and I think
the methodology of the actor in order to also like answer that question and to be able to run with it, that is not dumb either. I'm not saying like being able to improv and be able to recreate and like run for a moment. I just don't think it's usually filmable. It's for the most part, you get footage that is like kind of not cringy, but like just like hard to swallow as real. But they buy it, and we'll see.
It's interesting. I mean, I think that's all valid. So I want to take one step back and make sure we explain to the audience who may not be directors or understand directing enough what the danger here is. So essentially the danger is once you've decided you're not going to adjust the acting, which basically they are. Basically what's going to happen is they're not going to be on set with the actors. The actors are going to run around in the woods and film themselves. That's what's going to happen here.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about
someone
that.
else film the movie.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. That's, so we'll talk. But once you've decided that this is the appropriate test to know, can they basically carry a scene entirely on their own? But what Abe is saying, and he's completely right, is it takes it's a massive decision to let go of control of your film like that for a director. And I would say probably is being made exclusively by budget. Right? Like most likely because of the limitations of their budget, they decided, you know what? The only way to get the authenticity that we want is to not direct a film.
I've said it hundreds of times, and I'll say it again.
Ready.
No one should ever underestimate the power of video art in the 90s.
Okay.
I swear to God.
Okay. Say more about that.
I mean, I just want to say that it's like a conspiracy theory I have. That it was so potent in academic circles when you start and that you start looking at between the lines and you see, like we talked about on this podcast when we talked about Demolition Man, like people really respected video art and they thought it was the future. And if you go back and you watch it, it's absolute dog shit.
Okay.
And it's funny. It's funny to watch. I enjoy watching them. Also, they're so false and think that they're Andy Warhol is what they're doing. Is that they're like, oh, we could be like VHS artists. Anyway,
but also,
I think that's the mystique that they're dialing into. In my opinion,
fair.
These directors are going like, it's the flair of the. I mean, it's found footage film. It's the flair of the kind of like, is it real? What is it?
Right.
I don't know.
And I think that's the commitment to authenticity that we're like, that's what I mean by that is attempting to eliminate the possibility of feeling like this is a fiction work. Like attempting to eliminate the fictionality of it,
Spent too much time in goddamn schools, art schools, that it's just like it's up its own ass when it thinks about this opinion.
I can't see. It's hard for me to reconstruct what a film school would be telling them in the early to mid 90s, which is when they were in film school. I don't know. I mean, I can tell you that there's a lot of directors who use improvisational elements, like Cassavetes and Robert Altman and Christopher Guest and guys like that. But they wouldn't do this. They would not do this.
This is absolute lack of control.
Right. It's
not like, I don't know what the light's going to be like, but we should probably film around sunset. Why? Because that's the angle is good. That's motivated thinking with a little bit of improv. That's different from this is like, let's go out there and what's the scene?
I don't know. We're gonna make it up.
Literally walk toward that, and you're gonna see a thing, react to it.
Right. So I want to save some of that so we can actually talk about production, so that the audience knows exactly what we're talking about. So can I say though just a couple of counterpoints, because I mostly agree with you, but just some counterpoints here to be fair to the movie. So like, I think they did a pretty good job with casting at the end of the day. Like, I think the actors are pretty good in this film.
Oh yeah, I have nothing against.
I mean,
I think they did a good job.
When you think about what they had to do, which we're going to talk about in a minute, it's like, man, these guys are really good given what they had to deal with. Like Heather Donahue and her very famous tearful camera shooting in her own face stuff. It's like, man, that's a lot of commitment for an actor.
You believe it?
Oh, it's terrifying. It's very good.
Yeah.
It's like one of the most iconic scenes from a movie in like 5 or 10 years. So it's pretty good. But they took some big dumb risks and it worked out for them. I think you have to say that it's luck. One of the actors was hired because they could carry a camera. Like, they knew how to operate the camera. So like, well, you get the job done. So like, I don't know how sophisticated it is.
I love how much the more details you hear about it, the more you think it's a scam. Like, somehow the actors are going to get scammed by the end of this.
So that's a funny thing about this movie. Heather Donahue's family was like, this is a scam. You're going to get like lost in the woods. And
it's a definite thing you should be thinking if these is the details.
For sure. She wasn't sure about it. Like none of them were. And I think that's completely reasonable given what the situation is. So, just briefly, guys, I want to just mention a couple of times where a complete improvisation was used effectively as a casting tool, just to kind of give some context to the audience. So, one very famous example of it that you guys can all Google is there was an improvisational audition for the character of Elliot from E.T.
I knew you were gonna. I knew.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's so awesome, right? Like, so you can go back and watch the kid who got the job improving lines as a response to a casting director, and you can see how talented he is. Like, he's incredibly talented. And then you hear Steven Spielberg said, "I think he got the job," which is amazing. So it's like, so it's not like nobody uses it. Like it's used, but it's usually more structured. And
yeah, you can see how the kid like works up to it. Like, he starts the line, but then he stops, and then he thinks for a bit, and then he does it again. Like, he's working on the how to read it. That is different from like, right now I need you to be 100%
create
perfect.
A story.
Go.
Yeah,
they do anything and they go perfect.
Right, exactly.
That's exactly what we wanted. This ain't a scam.
I mean, right. Again, it is the circumstances they're trying to create. So I kind of nod at it like, okay, I guess it makes sense, but boy, it's a lot of problems. Yeah. So I guess like another crazy thing is that they're using a lot of they're putting a lot of energy into avoiding a casting call, which is a thing that you would never do usually as an independent filmmaker. Like, normally as an independent filmmaker, there are two options. There is, okay, I'm going to see the huge swath of humanity who wants to be in a feature film and try to find a couple diamonds in the rough. And I'm going to spend a month on this. You know what I mean? Like, that's what's going to happen. And, that's it. So that's one approach. And, sometimes that works out where you find some great talent. Another thing that a lot of independent films end up doing is they end up spending more money on this one job than any other job per, in terms of hours worked for pay. And that job is a casting director, because a casting director is going to whittle the search down to look to the 20 or 30 people they know who are very talented actors who they've met through workshops and stuff. So like, that is how most independent films choose to approach this subject, because what they really want is very high level talent for their proof of concept or for their short film or whatever. Like, this is the typical independent route, right? It's how J.K. Simmons got connected to Whiplash. Like, they met, I don't know exactly that story, but like the short version is basically J.K. Simmons agreed to be in a short film version of Whiplash that was successful enough, in part because he was in it, that they got funding to make the film, and then they made a fantastic film. Right. So it's the opposite approach. Like, instead of like doing a careful, targeted plan, this is the exact opposite of like, I'm going to whittle everything out, and then like the right person's going to show up on my door.
Instead of writing something that like you handed to like a famous person and they read it and they were like, this affected and touched me, I want to be involved in this project. You're like, who wants to be in the project?
Right.
We'll take
Run this gauntlet for me, you fool. And like, most people won't, and so that's how they know who their right actor is. It's very
I
dumb.
swear to God, this movie is like is this movie the biggest heist of all time?
I mean, you're getting a little intense here.
Like,
a little intense. No, I just think that the process that they chose, it's incredible that it worked out for them. It shouldn't have worked out, you know?
Yeah, for the budget they had.
Right. Well, that's the thing is, I think the budget sort of drove them to take a lot of big risks, and that's the biggest one. Okay, so now, production. So when they actually shot the film, they shot it for 8 days, and basically it was 8 continuous days. Okay, now during that time, this is my understanding, the actors never talked to the filmmakers directly. Okay?
It's wild.
Now, I've heard maybe there might have been 1 or 2 chats but like 1 or 2 like verbal interactions with like other key crew members to make sure the actors who were operating camera, by the way.
The directors came down in their helicopter.
Get out of here. No, for real.
They were like, yeah, keep
No.
they're eating caviar and drinking champagne.
Yeah, they're spending 25
They're like,
grand.
Keep doing what you're doing, actors.
They're spending 25 grand on helicopter rides and caviar. No, for real. So like I think there was like 1 or 2 interactions with like a production designer where they were like, hey, you got to capture this piece of the prop on film or we don't understand what it is.
Right.
That kind of stuff. But for the most part, this is what happened. So the actors, they go into the woods and then they improv all day, and then they use a GPS satellite to like walk to a milk crate. In that milk crate is a note for each of them. They all get notes, and the notes basically tell them, okay, so tomorrow you're going to hit this beat and you're going to focus on this adjustment, right? And so then the actors basically, they don't talk to each other about the adjustment. They just wake up the next day and then they work out scenes and they film them. So like, and of course, because they're actors, they're filming everything. They're filming literally every single thing, right? Because that's what you would do, right? So in one sense, it's incredibly authentic because they are trying to have a real feeling lost in the woods, trying to find their way, feeling overwhelmed and anxious. Like they've created the best version of those circumstances that they can without putting them in actual danger. So on that sense, it's authentic. On another sense altogether, it's just letting the actors kind of like do a shotgun blast of footage and making them work 24 hours a day. And the directors are basically directing the film from the editing lab. Like, that's what's happening, is they're cutting the footage together and be like, okay, well, I think we need this beat now. And they're rewriting the film as they go. That's what's happening. Right. Now, just a quick note, this is not legal. Like, you couldn't do this again today, I don't think. Or if
this is not union legal.
I don't think you can make people work 24-hour days, 8 days straight. I don't think you can do that in this country.
I think you can.
I think there's labor laws preventing it.
The way that
I'm pretty sure there's labor laws preventing it. We should look into that.
Because if you're just a bunch of pals, you can do anything you want for 48 hours.
I mean, the government's not going to come arrest you unless they find out about it and somebody complains.
It's against the spirit of the law, definitely, and it should be illegal, I guess. But technically, I think there's ways around this.
I mean, I think the way around it is the actors didn't sue or go to the cops.
Exactly.
If they had, it would have been.
Or they, signed it and they said, yes, this is the stipulation for how we're going to film it. Do you agree to these conditions?
Okay. I'm going to hold on to the possibility that even if they'd agreed, it still might be illegal.
I like your idea better because, once again, I'm going to really hit hard. This is actually an elaborate heist and the filmmakers are brilliant.
I'm like, you're getting more and more sardonic. I like it as we approach the structure where the witch might live.
Yes.
So, here's the other thing about this circumstance. So, okay. So, if you've watched this movie recently, which I hope you have, most of the daytime stuff is we're lost and then they're fighting, right? Like, that's most of the daytime stuff. And then at night, there's always some crazy thing. So, the way they film that is the actors would go to sleep, and then the filmmakers would actually just creep up on their camp and make these noises and stuff, and then they would have to wake up and react to it. So again, they're trying to create the most authentic experience they can for the actors, and they're doing that. But it basically means the actors never really get a full night's sleep. Like they basically are working in a nightmare.
The directors are monsters.
Yeah.
They're witches.
I mean, I guess I'm pointing out the illegality of it. I'm not here to like completely condemn them for it because it is the way to do this movie. And if everybody's signed up, I feel like, well, maybe we flip-flop places now because I wouldn't want to do anything illegal or damaging, but I also understand the necessity of these decisions.
See, I don't even understand the necessity.
Oh, really? Okay.
I have no problem with a bunch of people agreeing upon doing this stuff and going and doing it.
Right.
I don't think it needs to be problematic if it wasn't. Because if they were like, that actually is if you talk and are communicative with your actors and you're like, this is the way we really want to do it, would you be okay with that? Like, we're going to let you know up front, you'll be sleeping and we're going to interrupt you to get it.
Which
to make
they
it
did,
feel organic.
right?
Or
that's
like
what they told
in
them.
A time where like, we're going to give you a rest. So you still sleep, but like, just know, like, we want the feeling that it can happen at any time, even when you're not on. Do you agree to this kind of spirit of that? And if they're like, that sounds like a really cool way to make a movie and an experience, because I've done like experiments like that too.
I think they did.
Wouldn't it be cool if we just made a movie this way?
But just to be clear, I'm pretty sure the directors told him what the plan was. I don't think it was like, here, go out in the woods.
I don't think legality and like hanging something on them like for this, like I don't. It sounds like it's a non-issue because I feel like these stories would have come out.
Of course
they would. It's such a sensational movie that I feel like the aftermath of it, at least, maybe it wouldn't happen at the time. These actors, if they were made embittered by this situation, would be like, I still think that they did it in a wrong way. I think everyone was consenting, obviously, and probably signed things to that effect.
I mean, right. So just to like reiterate, so what are the directors doing this whole time? The directors are probably sitting in an edit bay somewhere. Maybe they're editing it themselves or with another editor or whatever. And they're just going through dailies all day. And then probably on a whiteboard somewhere.
Golden bathtubs.
probably on like a whiteboard somewhere. They're sort of structuring the movie and being like, okay, we need this beat here. They're doing a writing thing, basically.
They're looking at, we have this, but we need this to make that useful.
But it's sort of how you would do with a documentary, honestly. That's how a lot of documentaries deal with their narrative. But the tricky thing here is that they're on a limited time. They only have 8 days. And, I mean, the actors are putting like 4 or 5 hours of film every day, right? Like, I mean, of course they are. They're rolling all day. In fact, most of what they found in the milk crates, aside from notes, were batteries. They're just constantly going through batteries,
In the temporality of the film, there's like 4 days pass. And so that means in 8 days, they made 4 days. So that means they're shooting like afternoons, nights, like there's they had to track the time.
I mean, right. That's
just by looking at the sun and the shots. Like there's multiple movements. And so they had to figure that out, which means they're probably working like 16-hour days, probably.
Almost certainly. And that means that the directors then are having to sift through, 5 hours a day of footage, which is hard because that gives you, then you're working another 10 hours to make sure
you have a window
what can I do
of 2
with
hours
this?
To tell them
exactly.
before they sleep.
Exactly.
Or if you want to adjust things, there's no ways to like, all right, everyone, we're going to actually shoot this now because we realize we want to go this way with it.
Yeah.
Like you don't have a lot of space for audible.
So it's the longest week of anybody's life. Like it's a very, very long week or a very long 8 days, right? So one advantage to this approach, and the reason I think they're really doing it more even than their commitment to authenticity, is if they tried to make this movie for that budget and like actually go and direct the actors and have a crew and stuff, it's not possible. It's just physically impossible. It would go slower. And you would spend all kinds of money on crew and transportation and lunch and lighting and all this stuff. And
you'd build a small village in order to shoot.
Because you have to. That's what it takes to get a show.
That's
If
you want control.
If you want control.
If you don't want control, you can abandon all of that.
Well, that's the thing is, and that's what's so interesting about this film in general is the only way to make this film is to abandon control. And like, I just think most people wouldn't accept that. Like just most people would not accept it. And I think they paid a price for that decision. One of those
Yes.
prices being that like I'm not sure anybody believed they really knew how to make a movie. Like Eduardo, who's kind of the only guy that really branched out from Blair Witch, it took him 7 years to make his next big film.
Is he the Tom Sizemore looking
I think
motherfucker?
so. I forgot what they all. Yeah, I think that's right. But like most of the rest of them didn't really do a lot of work again. I mean, one of the actors did.
Right.
But like in terms of the directors, Eduardo's the one who sort of became a real director after that. But it took him 7 years after Blair Witch to make his next project. So that means they didn't really believe that he could direct a film, right? It has to mean that, because otherwise they would have been pouring offers on him, right? Or maybe he's really picky, but that doesn't seem true, right? Everybody makes a film when they get the spotlight on them, right?
I mean, it's very unique to have a film like this to be such a success to not get more work. Like, imagine someone had this kind of, I spent this much money. Like, literally the story of Robert Rodriguez, I spent $10,000 and I made El Mariachi. All right, well, here's 10 for Desperado,
right?
Like 10 million, by the way. And it's like, okay, so that's how it works. It seems like their careers didn't go that way because everyone kind of knew that the key to the success was the idea, not the execution.
I mean, that's clearly what Hollywood took from it. And they might not be wrong about that. They might not be wrong about that. But so, okay. They also didn't trust him that much as writers, though. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like at least they should have thought, like, you guys are at least innovative thinkers in terms of how to make movies, but they were not interested in that at all. Okay, so let's talk about the third sort of stage of this filmmaking, and that is marketing. This film is often advertised as the first film that advertised on the internet. And I would say that might be its most enduring legacy, ultimately. Because they didn't have any money for trailers or self-distribution or anything, the way they made buzz about the movie was they started a website for the film that made the film seem like it was an actual documentary and that the three filmmakers were missing. And that campaign was snapped up by Artisan when they purchased the movie, and Artisan tried to do a standard marketing campaign with it and scrapped it almost immediately because they realized, like, oh no, embracing the idea that this is real is the only reason people will see it. Like that, or not the only, but the biggest reason why people will see it. So like when I say try to do a traditional campaign, what I mean is they were taking like, crazy horror pictures of like the actors like crucified to those sticks and stuff. Like they were doing that stuff. That's like stupid, like,
it's the fucking cutest thing ever.
Yeah, it's great. God. So like, then they eventually realized like, why are we like, you know what I mean? It's easier for it to be real. Like that's actually easier and cheaper, and it drove interest.
And it drives interest
and it did
on like an insane amount because no one had ever done.
No one had really done that before, and these guys were willing to take such a big risk of like abandoning control that it seemed very real.
Right,
it seemed plausible, and ultimately, it kind of took months, like for the fact of it not being a real movie to actually permeate,
to be like popular.
Like the
consensus.
The actors weren't even invited to several very public screenings to keep the idea alive.
It's such a.
It sucks, right? Doesn't it suck for the actor?
Yeah, because that's like currency for some actors.
It's currency for all actors. None of those three were named actors, so like they needed this moment,
right.
And eventually they got their shot, of course, but like. Still, imagine you'd made this fantastic film, and they were like, "Okay, so you can't be part of it."
The biggest, it's like,
go away, go away,
go away. Right when it's like, but this is when I should
did this.
Be like, everyone should ask me. Think about like, what's her name, Anna Taylor-Joy at
Queen's Gambit.
Queen's Gambit. It's like they just like, all right. She's going to be in everything and look like everyone's going to interview her and it's going to be everything piece in the world. It's like, you lost that opportunity because of this thing that they wanted to do with the marketing of this movie that we all agree is actually better. You probably agree it's very smart.
Right. I think the actors
but also fucked
probably had a bittersweet feeling about it because I think they get it, right? Of course they get it.
Right.
But it's like, hey man, I did this film and I swam in the mud for you so that I could have a career, and you're robbing me of that. You know what I mean? And also I did much harder work on this film than actors normally have to do. Like much harder work. I had to operate a camera and so on.
Paid less.
Yeah.
But I know I'm an unknown and I should be grateful, but also, usually there's no reason you have to, but it just feels like every movie gets at least a shot to do this. This is the usual acceptable kind of like terms. They have red carpets, they, do that kind of stuff. It doesn't seem important, but it's about building your name and the cachet that you now have because people know your face and saw you literally on camera again.
So, So in hindsight, I just think it's fascinating that we have this like very early days of the internet community, and like we have a pretty clear sample of like what the internet community is going to be like forever, or at least up until this very day, which is this advertising campaign is conspiracy theory misinformation. Like that's what it is, and it's designed to flare outrage and intrigue, and people ate it up. In a way that TV couldn't do, but the internet can, and these guys had that figured out, and and they sort of gave us that blueprint, which we're still living with to this very day. Although, as I'm sure Abe is about to say, I think it's impossible for somebody to generate the belief that a movie like this is fake now. Or is real now? I don't think you could make that happen.
It's a one-time. Yeah. It's a seal. It's a seal that can be broken. They broke the seal. That makes this seminal. It doesn't make it good. But it is true that the ideas behind this, what fostered this genre, and what we reacted to the first time we all watched Blair Witch Project.
Right. I mean,
that is authentically an experience. That is a real reaction. That is, they pulled that off.
And
that it is good in that regard.
And like everybody walked out of the Blair Witch with the same like, did that really happen? Like that was the only thing people were talking about from that movie. I remember I went with a friend.
I don't know. I think by the end of the movie, you're like, written and directed by,
Well,
like
I don't think people know what that means in the same way, or I think
people know what that means.
Wait, I think 1999 film audiences didn't have as strong a grasp on what that means.
Turned off when the credits happen.
Well, I don't think they're thinking about the credits. They might have walked out before the credits, man.
I think maybe kids, because kids don't want to care.
I was pretty young when this came out, so that's possible.
So I think that's more of just you being fooled by the trope because we're a kid and we're like kind of like shitty at seeing that. But I think any adult who'd seen movies, basically,
I mean, just knows. Like the interviews and stuff say the opposite, though. I'm just telling you, like people were like the first bit in the Heather Donahue interview was like, "Oh, so you're not dead? Ha 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 ha." Like that was the first bit.
But that's the joke, though. They're still having
right. Yeah, it's the joke because for a period of time people believed it. Or they weren't sure. Like in that zone.
Right, yeah. I don't actually know. If people did or didn't. So.
I mean, her response was the vibe I got from her interviews was basically like, yeah, people, for a while it took a while to clarify I wasn't dead. She had family members that were asking if she had died.
Okay. If she had died.
Not asking her her parents, obviously,
Right. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know. I mean, yeah, man, it's a more naive time, right? Like, or maybe it shows.
I just feel like this is also the same. Like 1999 was also The Matrix, and people were getting their head around like some real shit.
That's two very cool movies for that year, though, right? Like, I mean, this is. I also don't love this movie, at all. I watching it this time. First of all, I was like, oh, this isn't shaky. But like I thought, it's fine. It's a lot of meandering, really, for not a lot of steak. A lot of sizzle, not a lot of steak.
Yeah, exactly.
And it only really worked when it felt authentic, which now, because as you said, film like found footage films have sort of advanced, it no longer feels authentic.
Yeah, they have and they haven't in some ways. They stuck in the same tropes, but yeah, the lexicon is more refined.
I just appreciated, honestly, I appreciated the acting. I really was impressed with knowing what these actors had to go through. With
They're really strong beats, but man, oh man, I
ready.
confide that so there's that moment where the character that what's her name?
Heather Donahue.
I keep forgetting. Heather Donahue, the character that Heather Donahue
I'm gonna
plays,
actually look up their names so we know what their names are.
is screaming at one of the guys.
Yeah.
Right.
About her film and
just
stuff.
After he kicked the map into the water.
Yeah, that's right. He throws the map away. Right.
He's like, it didn't matter, man. I just kicked it in. And then that's the guy I was thinking. It looks like Tom Sizemore.
He does. He's good too in this film.
And then she just loses her mind. You're right that it feels authentic in a time before we had like TikTok and did like videos of ourselves talking to stuff. Like it isn't. It's like a version of reality that they're like, maybe that's what like being like using a camera and like having fun with the pals or something like that. That's what filmmakers do because they're like cameras and want to just record their friends or whatever. And like some people like to do that. I know that's what is TikTok. But like I'm saying that there's like conventions built that become immediately identifiable as this is what it means to be like real, and that is so far removed from what society, like what we see in Blair Witch Project, is so far removed from what we actually perceive as authentic now that it's like an impossible notion to be like, looking back and watching it, this does feel authentic. It feels entirely unauthentic. When they're screaming at each other, it just feels like someone told you that you need to scream at each other for a while. Right? Isn't that the feeling you get from those improvs? I
mean, yes, I feel the actor stuff. I really think this is one of those cases where knowing how films are made, and also time having passed, like just the magic of it doesn't super work. Sure. I think that's what's going on here, but I agree that it's not flawless. It doesn't have that sort of like muted thing that a lot of real home videos have, of like the person just being a normal person who doesn't freak out about stuff or be dramatic, which is what most people are like especially when they're being filmed. Most people are sort of like fairly neutral on camera because,
right, because it's not a consideration as much. It's just like there's a microphone in front of me, but I can casually talk to you, versus
losing their mind and being dramatic.
I think you're right. There was more of a consideration back then. Like people didn't know how to be in front of camera. There's an awkwardness about it, and it's like perceived as very fake because
by you
feel them feeling the camera.
Yeah, I mean, I watched this about a month ago, so I wish I had a fresher. That's when I started braining on this idea. I remember. I mean, I guess my expectations were pretty low. Like I get like the second time I watched it, I was like, okay, so this is all horseshit. So now let's see what they did, and I was like, oh, it's actually kind of good. And I got more invested in the conflicts of the three characters, which is still very repetitive, and more disappointed by the witch stuff. Like this time when I watched it, the witch stuff was like, there's nothing here.
Oh, it's got the most bare. That's the other thing, is that as far as the pantheon of like horror movies go, even found footage films, they did so little work in making it spooky. It's literally interviews for like 20 minutes about like something's going on out there, and like look for these little imagery, plant and payoff. Maybe there'll be a woman, which most of them don't pay off. It's more of what it's doing into our brain, where it's like, okay, so it's a woman. She's dressed in white. She's got hair
I think
everywhere.
that's-
Is this, oh no, she's not hairy. You know, like we don't. She floats on the ground. Like there's a bunch of details, but no one knows. And then you go out to the spooky woods, and people hear things for the next.
But again,
hour.
that's
Like it's an hour and 20 minutes.
that's
also.
pretty consistent with the paranormal documentary genre. Because again, they're not trying to make a horror film in the same like they're not doing the scare jump scare thing. They're not doing that. They're doing like a fake documentary on a real thing, which means the scares are all like, is it real or not? That's the whole question of the film. Both is the Blair Witch real, and then is this thing I'm watching real? Like those are the two things that, and so it is light on content because it's trying a format where there wouldn't be a lot of content in a paranormal documentary. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be like, oh, there was that wind that one time. That is weird. That's the whole movie. Like
that's the whole like movie.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the idea. For better or
I'm
for
just
worse.
saying it's very bare, but like by giving, and I was saying that at the beginning, like by giving a little bit of detail, it goes a long way because of our imagination. But it's a lot that's what this film did to us, is that when you do go back and look at it, there is so little there that you realize how much your brain was working for them. And I think the format does ask you to do that.
I think you're right.
Found footage films
Absolutely.
in general beg you to see beyond the frame because you're so bored by just being locked in this frame forever. There you go, like, all right, something's going on downstairs. Or you're going like, I bet there was a scene in between that something happened because now they're acting this way to each other.
Which they do.
Cloverfield did that a lot.
They do that where they sort of like skip the dramatic thing that happened and then kind of recap it instead of having the scene.
It's just every scene beat in the interpersonal stuff is so bonkers to me. Like, she will not let the camera down. There's just so many aspects.
That makes sense to you, right? I see. I would defend that. But wait. I would defend that by saying, I think this was kind of a smart move by the filmmakers to put a woman as the director of the film in the film, because it makes a tension there that never gets addressed of like, do they really respect her and listen to her? And she feels defensive about it for obvious reasons, so she never lets up.
They do play on that.
And it's smart. It's really smart because that feels authentic to me. I could see that conflict,
Right, but it is there. I think she plays it up, and I think it's a pretty good thing. But they don't. Like it feels like, I know there's no scripting, but it feels like it was scripted at one point, where one of the men say to her, like, I just don't trust you.
I think he does say that.
It's like up
in the
top.
film, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like very up top. And he's like, and it's just like, it's when they first kind of get lost. It's like, and she's like, no, I know where we're going, kind of thing. And then, of course, she's basically kind of been lying about that. Because
self-deluded,
or something magical is happening with the woods.
I think that's the implication.
Like, it's either that she's not good at navigating, because they should have gotten out of there in 2 hours, right? Either she's not great at navigating, or something magical is happening in the woods. We don't know.
Yeah.
Or both, I guess. But you don't need both. You just need one explanation of why they're still there. So the implication is that the other characters don't assume the supernatural at first, so they blame her. And it creates this very contentious 2 men versus a woman kind of thing. And I think she's very smart to kind of up that kind of tension. But the men do stay away from it, which is probably another indication of its authenticity. Because men wouldn't want that kind of thing to be, look, this is not just the men like ganging up on the women. You know what I mean?
They wouldn't want that to be how
that
it's
doesn't
perceived.
help their argument.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't want to be perceived that way. So everyone's doing the right thing. It's just so over the top. And in terms of like, just getting back to the camera bit, not just the anger about like how they're acting and how people like, I hate that you're doing all this camera stuff. It really does feel forced to me.
What
when I watched
feels
it,
forced? What
even
feels
though
forced?
they give the explanation.
What feels forced?
forcing the filming to always.
Oh,
be
the fact that they're always on camera. I see.
The fact that she keeps recording, and despite the fact that they're going to die of hunger or
right. Why
whatever.
are we still making the film? I that is a stretch now.
And she does explain, this is all I have, but like they didn't do the work for me to understand why that necessarily is true. I guess I can believe it, so I'll let it lie. But like ultimately, I think that the film, it's striving for authenticity. There's a loudness to that authenticity.
Like it's too much. It went too far, or it's trying to convince you.
One
too
of those
much.
things. It's trying to convince you so hard that maybe at the time it did work, and you know what? More to its credit, that makes, in a way, my comment irrelevant because it was not made for an audience in 2021. It was made for an audience in 1999. But just me looking at it as a piece of art, it doesn't feel authentic at all.
It's hard for me to argue with that because it's hard for me to unknow what I know about it. So that might be.
So maybe it's just us being film school.
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of 2021 audience would probably view this with more suspicion. I mean, especially because at this point it's got like an infamy to it's a pretty infamous movie. So I don't know if anybody has what you might call like an authentic experience of this film anymore. Like I don't even know what that would mean. So I can't disagree with you about it. I can say I agree that the beats to keep the film going felt a little forced. I'm glad you said that because that reminded me that I felt that way when I watched it. That's true. And I think that feels like a film convention. But like in general, the actors playing the people that they are and like, trying to navigate this situation, like they were pretty good. And I am impressed with that given the fact that they're not name actors, you know what I mean? Like they're just all fresh, early in their career. And that they're working in these circumstances, I'd be very happy with these performances, wouldn't you? Like not necessarily the beats, but the performances.
I want to say in the same breath that I think that you're being generous, but I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think that the performances are good considering what they had.
Yeah, I mean sometimes it feels very drama-y, for sure.
But right, here's the thing: is I keep coming back to, because of the convention of how they shot it, how they filmed it, the improv nature of it, the lack of control, so therefore the lack of a guiding kind of eye that dictates the taste and tone and kind of can govern the moment to moment impulses of the movie. Since that doesn't exist, there's no voice. In other words. It will always be something that I will just be like, there's no way there's no way this can feel right.
Yeah, it just can't feel good. Well,
so it's not by the failure of the actors, it's just that the setup, I don't like the way they made this film.
So you reject it like on an aesthetic, moral level, kind of.
There's no morality in this. Like I honestly, I thought you were also being generous with, like, this would be totally illegal today, by the way.
It would be,
yes and no. I mean, like, I don't think that that's the thing I'm trying to point out. I don't think they're like method acting. We talk about this. This is a big thing that people talk about on Twitter and stuff. Like, I have no problem with method acting as a whole. Yeah, there are people who have very strong opinions about it, like never, why method act? There's no point to it. I'm like, there's always a point to it. But there's always a point to a certain methodology being approached in a certain way. It just has to be done in the right way. You're reacting to the fact that it was done in a wrong way, or the results weren't good enough.
Or that somebody abused the process.
But it doesn't mean that method acting as a whole is necessarily
right. That's
bad.
A baby with the bathwater situation. That's what it is.
Exactly. It has to be like tailored to the instance that it's most applicable for. Like if you're just doing a comedy like a Step Brothers or something like that, what does method acting earn you? I don't think it earned anyone anything. No one was method on that set.
Unless it took, like, I could imagine somebody like Michael Richards being method to get into the headspace of a character like Kramer. Like that I understand.
You read
the,
do you watch Succession?
I love Succession.
Or did you follow the story about Jeremy Strong that happened
I couldn't figure out why people were pissed off at him. Like, what did he do that was so bad?
I also was kind of in the same boat. Like, I kind of read it and I was like, this all makes sense. Like I was just like, this is fine.
I mean, I think that
and I understand that people had a lot of polarizing
thoughts. It sounded
thoughts
to me like he was supposed to view the role with disdain the way they view the role with disdain, and it's like, that's not how you get a good performance. Like, he needs to humanize and empathize with this character. It's the only way he can do this.
Whatever he's doing is working. And I'm not talking about method acting as much anymore. I want to bring it back to Blair Witch Project. What I'm saying is the methodology doesn't fit the narrative. And like in the case of like the Jeremy Strong interview and such, and some other more method, if we look like On the Waterfront or like a Marlon Brando or something like that, there's a lot of argument to be had about specific methodologies in films and their approach. You seeing the benefit on screen, it's almost magical because you're like, whatever was necessary, all I can say is that was an authentic
moment. And are you saying that's not true?
This is kind of the reverse
of this movie. Okay,
I'm saying of this movie, in the search for so much authenticity and identifying like what aspects make things authentic, like holding on a shot for too long or screaming loudly at each other, because that sometimes happens. They make a show of it and go so far in order to ensure that they have gotten it. And then they included it in the movie, like after editing. They could have cut some of that stuff out, but they didn't.
So wait. Let me jump in here. So it sounds like what you're ultimately saying is that this movie, in its attempt to be an authentic process, actually accomplished the opposite, in your opinion. And in
my opinion, the methodology they went the other direction. Authenticity. They could have got a way more authentic product by going the other direction.
As in raising money and doing a film for real, like the studio method.
I think so.
I don't know.
You could plan. You could plan. Well, the found footage stuff. You can just shoot. Like, they're not wrong about that. You can just go out there and shoot it. It can be minimal crew. You don't have to pay a lot of people. But the whole idea of like not being on set and making it feel real for the people, I don't think that was.
You don't
really
think that added anything,
especially the way that they auditioned everyone. They were like, create something out of nothing.
I'm opposed to making a film like that because I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to, and I'm like, I'm not making a movie just so that another piece of entertainment exists. I'm making a movie so that a story I feel passionately about exists the way I see it. And those are like, as narcissistic as that may be, that's the goal. These guys didn't seem to think that it mattered how they saw it. Although I will say, again, I do think for the genre that they're parodying, or not parodying, imitating, I guess is a better word, that they're imitating, they did accomplish it. So they might have known, might have known better than us what they were trying to do, and they might have gotten it. But it sure seems like it happened accidentally, or it sure seems like everything they tried worked out better than they should have expected it to. Right? That's my critique of it. You're saying like, no, it's the wrong method, which is hard for me to say.
I think those aren't mutually exclusive to me.
Yeah, I just have a hard time going quite as far as you because I am not sure that these guys can make this movie by doing it the real way. I don't know. I mean, maybe they can. I don't know if they can.
I'm not. Yeah, who knows?
Like if it was being directed by, fucking Wes Craven or whatever, like yeah, of course it'd be better if he directed it himself instead of through coffee canned notes in a milk crate. Absolutely, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying the filmmaking got in the way when it was supposed to kind of be freeing, and that was my read of it.
What improves?
I do think that there's a lot of strategies they use that are very good, and so there's that tactics conversation, and then there's kind of the more philosophical of like, are they making a movie like the lack of control? Is that like, how did they do that? Those are two different.
They are slightly different, but the lack of control thing just dictates every single other piece of what this is. I mean,
it really does. It's a mission they made really early, and they said this is the way we're going to do it. And I think I don't know if they were inflexible about it, but it seems like they may have been. It
seems like they put themselves in a situation where they couldn't change it.
Right, and I'm like, why?
Right, like that sounds
so
too
that's
confining
one problem
for you.
I have with it.
I can accept that.
That's one problem. That's neither here nor there. That's more of a philosophical disagreement with how movies are made for me. Which is, who cares? Like, as terms of the movie, and if it's good, and the reason I call it a trash movie is kind of a separate notion, which is because of the mechanics of the thing that I just said. The result is that it feels like a really loud facsimile of trying to be true as opposed to being true.
I'm curious.
They treat it like we're supposed to believe it's true. I know that a lot of people did. The lexicon of 2001 is different than now.
100%.
Than it is now. I'm aware that I'm making an argument in hindsight, and that's 2020. I'm just saying, when you go back and look at it, you see those seams so clearly that you realize that the advances that they've made in like in terms of like the found footage genre now is much better.
It is better. Yeah, maybe I guess my view on it is like sort of appreciating it as a historical artifact. Like when it's definitely gets a historic look and not like a, how do I feel about it as a piece of entertainment. I think that's right.
We can deconstruct it and criticize it and also admire it.
But of course you're right. But I don't view The Matrix that way. Like The Matrix I still watch as a piece of entertainment and treat it through 2021 glasses because it still deserves it.
You don't even need that, baby. They're updating it, dude.
I don't want to hear that, man. I don't want to get into that at all. Yeah, I'm not into it. I don't like it.
Yeah, dude.
I hope it's good. I don't know.
New DLC dropped.
Oh, God. No, but I think you're right to point out that there is a sort of, to appreciate Blair Witch, there is a kind of like, you're like a rose-colored lenses you have to look at it, because it doesn't really hold up now, because we're a lot more cynical now about this kind of shit. So like it's more of a, instead of being an intriguing premise, it's a lot more like a, oh fuck you kind of premise. I get that, and I agree with that. I didn't view it this time with that lens. I viewed it to see like, well, what was it actually like? I don't even really remember it, and I liked it better than I thought. So I don't know. I mean, I'm intrigued to hear what the audience has to say about that. Like whether for them it still works, or if they're like, nah, it's only it's basically Birth of a Nation now. Like we don't want to hear about it anymore. Like that's it, you know?
No, man. I think a lot of I hope the takeaway isn't just the final kind of conversation or my influence on your argument, which I think is very good, which is to point out that, like the filmmakers really did find a way to own the cheapness and the necessity of the film that they were setting out to make. They knew they could only handle so much, and they went about it in the right way to succeed. And you're so right about that. These filmmakers were almost impossibly smart, with not just from the content that they were creating and their intrigue in the the non-existent genre that they had like created, in like the real thing, looking at real paranormal videos and such. They were so on point about all this stuff and deployed all the right mechanisms to create it out of necessity. It's just like, it feels like a student film. That's all.
Well, and it's supposed to feel like a student film.
It's supposed to.
Which I think is it's convenient. That's a convenient decision that I don't necessarily like. Uh,
I don't. I don't, because I know that it is like, well, then you're just saying that they succeeded. Yes, I am. But
but
also,
you're still
like,
allowed to.
they're asking us to believe to believe these people so much, and to like, oh, I'm so crushed by this. Like, what makes horror work? And I'm just like, I look at it and I'm just like, I don't
It doesn't
care
deserve.
about any of these people. They don't feel real.
Okay.
They feel like fake. They feel like
Abe
fake.
came in real hard and shut down the Blair Witch Project today. No, but I think it's.
But you're so
No,
right.
I mean, I
though.
think your reaction is a reaction that there's a percentage of people, and I don't know how high it is, that will view this through that lens, and that this film is kind of a transgression against authenticity in hindsight instead of a journey toward it. I believe that the filmmakers thought they were trying to make an authentic film. But I do agree that in hindsight, it's not, for sure. I mean, especially because they're lying in their advertisement, right? Like, that's the least authentic thing you can do. But also, it's a lie you and I would have done. Like, there's no question I would have done it, wouldn't you? Right? I mean,
Yeah.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
Like, more power to him. I don't know. I respect this alternate methodology as a concept. I would not do it because I would not want to make a film this way, but I think it's interesting that somebody did, and especially that it succeeded.
Yeah, I agree with literally everything
Yeah.
you just said. I would just go as far to say one
I'm
more
ready.
thing, which is the reason that I feel that way is because when you watch the movie, it's a trash movie. It sucks. And that's why I think the way I think
You're gonna wake
that
up.
way. Because it really does suck. Like,
It's not that
the
fun.
scenes are
Yeah, it's not as fun as I remember it.
like, most of the scenes are like, what did you do with the map?
Right.
Ah!
There's a lot of bickering.
And then it's just cuts
Yeah.
to quiet.
It's a lot of bickering about.
I'm sorry.
It's a lot of bickering about what might have happened, and sort of like 4 things happen. I agree. It's not great.
Yeah, it's talking.
Uh,
It's not great, but man, that marketing and found footage as an idea.
Yeah, they really onto something there. There's
Struck a genius.
and then there's like documentaries that like are creating a kind of fiction, like that it's almost better than reality. Like this, my favorite doc, and I always talk about it. Sherman's March. I love that documentary. Have you seen it?
Mhm, mhm.
The Ross McElwee film. So like that's another example of a person who's
Yes.
doing an extremely authentic film, in the sense that it's just him with a camera. Like he's doing that, but he's assembling a lie. You know what I mean? Like the film itself is like true, but not.
It's
Yeah,
a troll.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I know.
I love
Yeah,
it.
see, that to me is like
F
yeah.
is for fake is
Yeah,
the same
yeah,
idea, and that's
Yeah.
Orson Welles. Yeah, man,
Me
I
too.
love that shit.
Well,
I love, my favorite documentary is, I mean, it's not a documentary, but This Is Spinal Tap is like so important to the
mockumentary.
genre, to the documentary forms. Mockumentary, yeah, but like the
for sure.
forms. Like, Reiner's so aware of exactly the kind of things that I was pointing out that these guys are aware of. Like in terms of like hanging too long on a shot, or like camera angles that are a little bit too close and stuff like that. Stuff that I think that the actors did naturally because they had seen some of this stuff, but they didn't do enough of because they weren't like well versed enough to know like we should also do that shot and we should do
'Cause
that
they're
shot
not doing
and there
shots.
should be a telephoto.
Yeah.
Because they don't think about it, but they do know like, oh, how do you show like this little wood piece of haunted wood sculpture? How do I show that? Get real close and let it just swing. Like they knew how to make it creepy, even though they're probably not DPs. So I don't know. I just think that there's a lot of good things that this movie did, and its successes are based around that. But really, its success is that it had never been done before, and it is a very good idea.
Right. It's really more the premise than the movie. Right.
Yeah, it really is. And that's how, like you mentioned, the actors, that's how everyone admitted that. They knew as soon as you hear the idea about what you're doing and you're like, oh, I see what you're doing. Well, I'm going to play with that I'm gonna be I'm gonna be a team player here and gonna be a part of this idea, which is really great. Okay, yeah, it means that you're like basically it's gonna do nothing for your career. Yeah, okay. It's just sad when you look
I
at
highly doubt.
how it
I
kinda all
highly
fell
doubt
out.
that they really knew that's what they were agreeing to. But
Yeah, I'd be eager to see exactly what they thought about it.
me too. I mean, that is interesting. It's like, did they think that? I mean, I don't know, because it's such a nightmare of a process. So, like, they might have just thought, well, it's a good experience. But then when they saw the film, they might have thought, oh, this is really something. And then when they saw how it was going to be marketed, they might be like, fuck, I'm missing out on something that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Like a real journey.
Momentary reactions.
A real journey.
Yeah. That's much like life is. I bet that's probably true to the narrative of all the actors in the film.
Who can say? Don't know.
We're not actors. We're not those actors.
Acted.
We're not
You've
even
acted.
actors.
You've acted a little bit.
I've done my fair share of terrible
You and I acted
acting,
in today's topic about Game of Thrones.
Sure, yeah. And and as you know, I had to be a cartoon because I don't know how to be real.
That's right.
Camera. That's why I talk about the authenticity.
I believe I wrote that episode, and I believe I wrote as your character the real Abe, and you refused to do it.
Yeah, I was
there
just
is
like,
no real Abe.
I will be a cartoon.
There is
character.
no real Abe.
I will be like a cartoon CG cat, trying to be cool in one moment and then sad in another moment. Why? Because I gotta.
That's right. Abe defied my demand for his authenticity that day.
I'm very hard to work with. I take pride in it.
You heard it here for Abe Tempest Epperson.
Oh, I love it. I love when you tell stories about me. It makes me feel like I'm important.
I love telling stories about you.
I hope that you be able to. I hope it like you can give one of my eulogies.
Dude, I would give you a killer eulogy.
I'm gonna have a lot.
I would give you a killer eulogy.
And I know. Like I'm thinking about dying just so like this could happen. No, it's like I love hearing about what people
Webster's
think of
Dictionary defines Abraham as.
That's right, and I love it, and I don't feel guilty about it. I want everyone to talk about me all the time and make me feel like an important boy.
Sweet scene boy.
I am important. I'm a director.
Sweet.
Man, this is good. I like this. I like this conversation. I like the frankness that you approached it, and I agree with almost everything you said. I just go even farther
it's trash.
And make a fool of myself. Yeah.
Well, hopefully you all enjoyed it and our insights into the Blair Witch Project. I mean, it may not be my favorite movie, but man, they tried something and they succeeded. So good for them. Good for them. Enjoy that $200 million. Well, they're not enjoying it. Artisan Films is enjoying it.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. I swear to God, it was the most elaborate heist of all time.
They
just like disappeared, and they're like, "Where'd they go?" And like, all the $200 million that we got is gone somehow.
Yeah.
And they're like,
Blair Witch 2 is just
Ocean's
Blair
11.
Witch 2 is just Andy Garcia shows up with his cane and he's like, "Now you're gonna pay me back." Absolutely.
I love these guys. I hope this is true. I know it's not, but it's just how I want to perceive the world.
All right. Well, farewell, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!